know, photographers do these jobs to stay behind the camera. Yeah, man, you can tell we're a bunch of goobers that don't like to be in front of the camera, man.
I hate this color.
Which one am I looking at? Is that one there?
Okay, just straight in this. Okay, perfect.
I'm a photojournalist here, sometimes describing to it. We'll say photographer, we'll say videographer, and I think a photojournalist really captures the work we do. That looks super nice though.
I am a multimedia journalist, I am a reporter, and I'm a photographer. I do everything. I honestly don't like being on the camera that much at all. I can do it, but to me, the less you see of me is the more you get to hear of somebody else.
It's not about us, you know, it's about the people that deserve to have their stories told.
There's no story too small for us to ignore, and everyone has an aspect of life that matters.
It's extremely rewarding for me, just helping those people in the community, highlighting all those people and their stories and doing the best that we can for them. That's the reward, that's why we do it.
I'm grateful that our station really, you know, focuses on is the people, even though I'm like on camera right now, talking about myself.
One of the highest honors I can get is when I go to a story and I'm interacting with kids, which I think is really important to do. And a little boy or girl says, "See you later, camera girl." That's the highest honor for me. It's the coolest thing to be called that.
No, this was the first time coming here, and I mean, you can tell this is such a place of honor. As soon as you come here, it's just such a place of reverence as well. You just come and it's just the sounds of the fountain. There's just kind of a peace to it. And I remember thinking, like, it's kind of wild that the National D-Day Memorial is in such a small town, you know, but then you understand the connection that this small town has to D-Day and how much D-Day affected this small town. It makes sense, and I couldn't think of a better place for this place to be in terms of honoring those that went on that important day, you know. Yeah, a bit of a drive, about 2.5 hours, but you know, it's one of those things where 2 hours is nothing to tell a story like this.
But on June 6, 1944, the soldiers would spearhead the invasion of Normandy. 19 Bedford boys from A Company were either dead or missing. Another Bedford man in a different unit was also killed. It was the largest per capita loss for one town in America.
And knowing that, you know, I'm doing my small part to immortalize those stories, I guess, in a way. You know, it'll always be on the internet forever. You know, it's like 2.5 hours to drive to do this story is nothing. And being very nervous about it because this is a very important story to tell, and making sure that you're doing it right and telling it with respect as well. Because this is such a small, tight-knit community, and it affected that community in ways I can't even imagine.
Never fully recovering from losing her second son.
My mother, till her dying day, never quit talking about Jack. She just felt like a part of her died when Jack died. That took a toll on her.
The impact of D-Day on such a small community with a National Guard unit having 20 people killed, I think is really poignant.
Printed out photos of the 20 Bedford boys and found each grave and placed those photos there to have that face for the viewer to kind of connect with. It's just a bit more powerful to see the faces, as you know, and put the faces to the names, and to understand that these were young boys that went over there to fight and die for our country. I remember her just going through all of the personal effects that he had, and it's just really powerful to hear that connection that she had with him while barely even knowing him. You know, she was such a little girl at that time. And it's hard to keep it together during interviews like this, because it is so personal, and you can tell that the love that she had for her brother that she barely knew. And it's one of those things where, you know, I might be behind the camera, but I mean, it affected me as well, just hearing her talk about finding the news and that her brother had passed, and how much it really affected her mother too. I believe she said that her mother never fully recovered from it, and that's just something that I can't imagine. You know, Hollywood is actors, you know, but these are real people that we're meeting and hearing these stories from. And I've always felt that, you know, these are real stories. Like, history to me is always much more engaging and compelling than fiction. And so I've always gravitated towards longer form stories. And so having the opportunity to work on a story like this is incredibly rewarding. Like I said, it's my small part to play in keeping this history alive, and hopefully sharing a story that people may never have heard of before. And I think that's really important.
We can tell you that the one shot was heard coming from the woods behind the Ponderosa restaurant.
The mere mention of DC snipers, it immediately, there's a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, I remember that happening.
In October of 2002, police and federal agents were searching for a serial sniper.
2002, I was in 4th grade when that happened, so I do remember the news coverage, even though I was all the way in Indiana.
You're watching the News 6 Network.
We can tell you that the one shot was heard coming from the woods behind the Ponderosa restaurant at about 8 o'clock this evening.
It was just one of those things that just kind of remember seeing on the news when you were younger.
While walking across the parking lot of the Ponderosa Steakhouse in Ashland, a Florida man named Jeffrey Hopper was shot in the abdomen and critically wounded. An attack that bore all the hallmarks of the serial sniper.
We are acting as if it is. We will continue on that mode until we know that it is not.
It was one of those, just looking back, that it had been so long that people were willing to speak.
As the shootings continued, it looked like the jurisdictions hadn't had a whole lot of cooperation with each other. So I called Dave and said, Dave, we need to get a plan together.
Especially with the law enforcement, sometimes aren't typically eager to go back and look back on things from in these kind of cases, which makes sense.
I tell you, it was a lot of good police work done.
But just through the relationships with our reporters that they had with them, that they knew that, you know, we were gonna be fair and really just try to tell the story of what happened.
At the time, Colonel Stuart Cook was the sheriff of Hanover County.
Everybody was on edge. It was frightening times. I mean, as I said, for everybody, law enforcement included.
Looking back on that and just really highlighting the awesome work that the law enforcement did to stop these guys in the end.
And he made it known his team was going to operate differently.
We weren't going to do what they were doing in Northern Virginia. That if we have something to give you that will help us clear this case and put the citizens at ease, we're going to give it to you. But until then, we're not coming back out here and talking to you every 30 to 45 minutes just to have a dog and pony show.
The main takeaway should have been how impactful, Hanover Sheriff's Department and our local law enforcement here in our area was to a giant national case like that FBI was working on, everyone was working on around the clock, and it really came down to just the great police work that they did here in our local area, and the people that are serving us helped in a case that big, and it really paid off in the end.
From the bullet shell casing to a letter from the snipers that had been found tacked to a tree, the evidence found outside the Ponderosa would prove critical to solving this case and later prosecuting Muhammad and Malvo. That's why Cook and his deputies processed everything.
It was September 19th, just after 4 in the morning.
We have a lot of archival tapes of so many things that have happened, and it's interesting that sometimes even within our own station, people don't really realize how the scale and magnitude of the things that we cover on a daily basis. It might just be another day at the office for us, but I mean, these things, it lasts forever because we're capturing it now, and like that'll be there years and years from now. The big thing was we had so much archival footage to look through, and so with that, it was just try to figure out a way of how to go through and show all the best stuff, and this was the one thing that came up with as far as working this monitor and putting the video into that and going back to the scenes of like where this video was originally captured from. So just going all over the place, multiple locations in our viewing area there in Ashland, Henrico, here in Petersburg, just really retracing the steps of, you know, former photojournalists before us that had shot this video that was all there for us because it was already captured by our journalist. Because that's all it was just kind of moving this around like this, putting the footage in there in post. So I really was just walking around the streets in the dark with a TV monitor like a crazy person.
2 decades have now passed since the Ponderosa shooting, but Cook and Hines still vividly recall how their deputies and their community responded with vigilance.
You know, we try to take, you know, everything we work on as seriously as possible, but this was one obviously that, you know, the mere like mention of DC snipers, it immediately, like, there's a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, I remember that happening, and it just makes sure that we, you know, did it as correctly and like thoroughly as possible.
Everybody was saying thank you for what you're doing. They were thanking law enforcement officers for shutting an interstate down, because that was the fear that had gone across the entire East Coast.
There's a lot at stake when you receive a rescue call. It's an emergency and you have to respond and do your best job to not only arrive with a sense of urgency, but also a level of calm to reassure people that they're going to be okay. And in this moment, they were okay because the team saved their lives ultimately. Because news happens everywhere, it can happen anywhere, and sometimes these things happen 5 minutes away from our station, and sometimes they happen 2 hours away.
Reedville, Northumberland County is a kind of farm community. It's a small area.
2 hours out from Richmond is the Smith Point Sea Rescue, and they're located in Reedville, Virginia, right on the coast by the Chesapeake Bay.
We have a very dedicated group on Smith Point Sea Rescue,
which is a group of volunteer sea rescue people, men and women, who really care about saving lives out on the water.
When I heard people in the water, I dropped everything, jumped in my car and came.
This group of volunteers I got to spend the day with were so sweet, and they're a little bit older because they volunteer now. Some of them are retired, and I thought they just had completely infectious personalities. And then we took a tour of the boat. So we drove to their liftoff and got ready to go. Seatbelts on, you know, life vests on, and showed us around on the water. And they walked us through kind of the day-to-day of when they receive a call, what that looks like for them, the level of urgency that they have, the level of calmness that they have. And they walked us through what that means to be doing their job. There's a lot at stake when you receive a rescue call. It's an emergency and you have to respond and do your best job to not only arrive with a sense of urgency, but also a level of calm to reassure people that they're going to be okay. And in this moment, they were okay because the team saved their lives ultimately. So something you have to consider when you're sharing a story is when it happened. So when we arrived to meet the sea rescue team, they had already saved these people's lives. They've been recovering and doing well. And you have to ask yourself as the photographer, as you create this story, is how can I share it in a way that reflects what actually happened, even though it already did happen? So for this story, my reporter and I, Greg, were thinking about ways we could bring that back to life and showcase what happened without us having been there. So at times that's photographs being used. We have pictures of the rescue happening.
The conditions of the 5 men and 3 women are worsening.
There was one person who was hypothermic.
Volunteers, including Pete Ortiz, pulled the people on board one by one.
Because, I mean, some of them had a shocked look on their face.
It's cool when you can have a shoot on a boat, because how many times can you do that? But it's hard to shoot on a boat. You know, you're only out there for a certain amount of time, and you have to work with those confines. There's always some kind of parameter in a story you have to work with. And on this day, it was being on a boat, having a small boat of space. Let's say the audio of just an engine roaring, and we're moving at fast speeds. There's a bit of wind hitting the camera. Being mindful of your sound, the visuals, that happens every story, and you have to work around that. But there are creative workarounds too, where, sometimes we threw a GoPro in the water to kind of simulate the sensation of being in the water.
A moment later, the vessel disappears beneath the choppy waves.
But you make it work, and that's kind of the fun challenge of this job is every story has its unique set of parameters, and I'm gonna problem solve creatively, artistically, I hope, to still bring it to life working within those parameters. And I loved how that story turned out. I love knowing I got to spend precious time with these people as they open their arms and let me into their world. And I'm filming something that I really hope reflects their experience as a team that's been doing this for so many years. And when you see the story come on the TV, I think there's a little bit of magic underneath it, knowing I helped them share their story. And hopefully I did it as best as I could. And they see themselves represented in it as they do their job every single day.
This is crazy.
People were in shock. People were in disbelief that this was happening to this elementary school. I saw people in tears. One distinct gentleman that I remember talking to, he told me that he went to Fox Elementary School when he was a child. It was something I didn't expect, and it was early in my time here in Richmond.
It's just a tragic loss to the community.
And it was a night I won't ever forget. I remember turning down Robson and just seeing like a wall of smoke and it being so thick and so distinctive.
This is crazy.
People were in shock. People were in disbelief that this was happening to this elementary school. I saw people in tears. One distinct gentleman that I remember talking to, he told me that he went to Fox Elementary School when he was a child. I would imagine a lot of people were just here just looking at it because it's something that you just can't ignore. And for me as a storyteller and most importantly as a journalist, I can't ignore this.
It's been burning for about an hour, I know at least.
I'm really humbled just having people just talk to me with something like this.
Looks like this thing is just getting started in a way. Woo! I hope the school isn't gone.
Scary situation, and it was a lot of unknowns at the time, and I just did what I had to do and just talk to people.
It's a historic property. The kids alone, what are they going to do on Monday when they have to go back to school? That's all that comes to my mind.
So I took it upon myself to stay there, maybe up to 2 hours, and I stayed maybe an hour and some change afterwards just to produce a piece for the community. I want to say it's for the show and it's for me, but it's for them, and it's something that people are going to wake up to and just be in disbelief that this school, this historic school, was gone.
We're trying to share people's voices, their ideas, their perspective.
It's truly an honor to be able to just share those stories, and I hope we do it justice.
When we can elevate their voice, it can magnify that good to something truly great.
You sit down with them and you just have a conversation.
These people matter, their voices matter.
There's people out there that truly deserve to have their stories told.
I worked on a story where I visited a senior living home in Chesapeake Bay for a gentleman who worked for NASA as a photographer for nearly 50 years. I think sometimes people can feel forgotten in the work they do, in the life that they've lived. We highlighted his work near his 50 years at NASA as a photographer. And when the story was airing, we heard from his wife, and they set up a whole watch party in that senior living home for this story to air. And we got a text back from him saying, I felt like a celebrity that day. It was really meaningful to me with this shoot to highlight this gentleman's work and make him feel like a superstar.
I'm gonna go slow! Watch out, for God's sake!
My reporter and I, we had the opportunity to interview a gentleman who's
103.
Looking at him, never would have guessed. Fighter pilot, World War II, all he wanted to do was to go fast.
That's me as a flying cadet when I went through flight school.
Had so much life to him, and just hearing his story, this man witnessed the atomic bomb.
And the thing went off. And I was in the plane looking with a double shield on me, everything. And it was the brightest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Getting to tell that story of his, it's something I'll hold dear and close to my heart. It's the best thing in the world.
One that always sticks with me is there's a restaurant called Pops that had seating of 6 seats, but during COVID, all the restaurants had to cut their seating by half.
Our business has been down 80% from last year.
I cried many nights thinking I worked so hard to get here, and then it's tough.
It really is.
It was something that we can go out there and really highlight, you know, this great little community staple. And after it aired, like the next day there was a line going all the way out of this restaurant, and they had told us that you saved our restaurant, you know, and I'm just happy I could just do my small part in that, you know.
It's a very awesome responsibility, and I try not to take it for granted every day. When you tell their story the right way, you can really change someone's life, and that's really awesome.
It's the little good we do along the way that really matters, you know? And I hope the little good we do with every story that we do, I hope that matters along the way.